The blood wouldn't come off. No matter how much I wiped at the keys, they stayed sticky and stained. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the rag, and every breath I took felt like I was inhaling shards of glass. The only light in the room came from my laptop screen, the cold glow spilling over my desk and onto the floor. Somewhere behind me, I heard it again. That faint scratching sound, like nails dragging across wood. It wasn't outside, it was inside, and I live alone. I don't know what I expected when I started this whole thing, but it definitely wasn't this. I'm not even sure how I got here, wiping blood off a keyboard while feeling like something invisible was standing inches behind me, watching. If I could go back, I'd smash that laptop to pieces before I ever downloaded Tor. I'd burn that damn package before opening it. I'd do anything to stop this. But it's too late now. The damage is done. I didn't just buy something on the dark web. I bought a curse I can't escape. This all started 2 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. Back then, I was just a normal guy. I worked a boring tech job, spent my nights scrolling Reddit or gaming, and occasionally fell down internet rabbit holes. Nothing unusual. I'd always been fascinated by the hidden corners of the web, though. I read the stories, horrifying tales of people finding disturbing videos, cursed items, or even human trafficking rings, but part of me thought most of it was just urban legends, fiction to scare people away from poking around where they shouldn't. So one night, bored out of my mind, I decided to explore for myself. I'd heard about the dark web plenty of times, but I'd never actually used it. Getting started wasn't hard. I downloaded the Tor browser, set up a VPN, and followed a few guides to keep myself anonymous. The internet made it seem easy, and it was. Too easy. The first few hours were uneventful. Most of the sites I found were dull or broken. There were plenty of illegal marketplaces, drugs, fake passports, stolen credit cards. I even stumbled across a forum where people traded hacking tips. It all felt distant, almost fake, like I was looking at props from a crime show. But then I found it. It was a marketplace, but not like the others. This one didn't sell drugs or guns, it sold strange things, cryptic things. There were listings for objects like cursed jewelry, mystery boxes, and something called horror in a jar. The descriptions were vague, the prices high. Everything about it felt wrong. And yet I couldn't stop scrolling. That's when I saw the listing that would ruin my life. The title was simple: Eternal Clarity, Guaranteed to Change Your Life. There was no picture, just a brief description. Unlock the truth of your existence. No refunds. Use at your own risk. It was priced at 0.03 Bitcoin, about $500. For some reason, I couldn't stop staring at it. The words felt like they were written just for me, as though the screen knew I was looking. My rational side told me to leave it alone. It was probably a scam or worse. But the curiosity was unbearable. What did eternal clarity even mean? Was it a scam? A cryptic joke? Before I knew what I was doing, I'd clicked buy. The confirmation screen popped up and my heart sank. The package arrived a week later. It was small and unmarked, wrapped in plain brown paper with no return address. I remember holding it in my hands, feeling how oddly heavy it was for its size. I should have thrown it out right then, but I didn't. Inside was a polished wooden box about the size of a shoebox. Its surface was smooth, almost too smooth, with strange carvings I didn't recognize. There was no visible way to open it, just a small USB drive taped to the side. That night, I plugged the USB into my laptop. The drive contained a single folder labeled Start Here. Inside the folder was a text file with instructions. They were strange. The first instruction was simple: read the attached passage aloud at 3 a.m. Do not skip this step. The text file also included warnings. It said the process was irreversible once started. It said I'd be contacted with further steps. And it said one last thing: complete the cycle or face the consequences. It was stupid. I know that now. But back then I thought it was some elaborate internet prank. At 3 a.m., I sat in my dark apartment, lit a candle for ambiance, like the instructions said, and read the passage aloud. It was just a string of nonsense words, letters and symbols that didn't make any sense. But as I read, the air in the room seemed to change. It felt heavy, charged, like static electricity right before a thunderstorm. The candle flickered wildly, though the windows were closed, and then I heard it, the first scratching sound, faint and distant, coming from somewhere deep in my apartment. That was 2 months ago. Since then, my life has unraveled piece by piece. I've followed every instruction sent to me. Each one gets stranger, more demanding. The scratching has become constant, louder, and sometimes at night I see shadows move across the walls, even when there's no one there. Whatever I bought on the dark web, it's not just an item, it's alive, and it won't stop until I finish what I started. I've always been a little too curious for my own good, the kind of person who can't leave a mystery unsolved or an idea unexplored. That's probably why the dark web fascinated me so much. Not because I wanted to do anything illegal, I wasn't looking for drugs or stolen credit cards, but because it felt like this secret world everyone talked about but few really understood. I'd read the stories, of course, tales of people stumbling across horrifying videos, cursed items, or worse. But most of it seemed like nonsense exaggerated to keep people away, urban legends for the digital age. And honestly, I thought I was smarter than that. One Friday night, bored and scrolling through the same social media feeds for the 100th time, I decided to dive in. I wasn't expecting to find anything crazy. I just wanted to see for myself what the fuss was about. Setting everything up wasn't hard. I downloaded Tor, turned on a VPN, and followed a few online guides to make sure I was anonymous. Within minutes, I was on the dark web. At first, it was underwhelming. Most of the sites were either broken or selling stuff I had zero interest in. Drugs, counterfeit money, fake passports. It felt like a sketchy online flea market. But then things got strange. I started finding listings that didn't make sense. One marketplace offered mystery boxes with no explanation of what was inside. Another sold haunted objects with vague descriptions like "do not open after midnight." There were even ads for services, everything from custom curses to hackers for hire. It was like falling down a rabbit hole. And then I found the listing that would ruin my life. I wasn't even searching for anything specific when it popped up. The site was plain, just black text on a white background, no flashy graphics, no distractions. The title of the listing read, "Eternal Clarity, Guaranteed to Change Your Life." There were no pictures, just a short description. Unlock the truth of your existence. No refunds. Use at your own risk. It was priced at 0.03 Bitcoin, which was about $500. Not cheap, but not so expensive that it felt impossible. I couldn't stop staring at it. At first, I laughed. It sounded ridiculous. Eternal clarity? What did that even mean? The whole thing screamed scam, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt this weird pull, like the words on the screen were speaking directly to me. I told myself it was stupid, that I should close the browser and forget about it. But I didn't. I couldn't. The cursor hovered over the buy button, and I hesitated. My logical side was screaming at me to walk away. But another part of me, this deep, gnawing curiosity, wouldn't let me. What if it was real? What if it was something extraordinary? I took a deep breath and clicked. The screen refreshed, and a single line of text appeared. Your order has been received. Further instructions will follow. No receipt, no tracking number, no shipping estimate, just that one line. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Part of me felt a rush of excitement, like I'd just done something daring and forbidden, but mostly I felt unsettled. What had I just signed up for? I closed the browser, shut my laptop, and tried to shake it off. It was probably nothing, I told myself, just some scammer who'd laugh at the idiot who paid $500 for eternal clarity. But a week later, the package arrived. 6 days after I clicked buy, the package showed up. I found it on my doorstep when I got home from work, just sitting there. A plain, nondescript box, wrapped in brown paper with no labels, no address. Nothing. For a second, I stood there staring at it, like if I looked long enough, it might disappear. My stomach was in knots. I hadn't been able to stop thinking about the purchase all week, part of me excited, part of me uneasy. Honestly, I'd convinced myself it was a scam, that nothing would come of it, and I'd just wasted $500 on some ridiculous whim. But now, it was real. I picked up the box. It was heavier than I expected. Not unreasonably so, but solid, dense. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and just stared at it for a while, like opening it would be crossing a line I couldn't come back from. Eventually, I grabbed some scissors and started cutting through the tape. Whoever packed it must have had a thing for overkill, because it was wrapped tight, layer after layer of plain, unmarked tape. Finally, after what felt like forever, I got to the contents. Inside the paper was a wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. It was smooth and polished, dark wood with a kind of eerie shine to it. On the lid was a carved symbol, a circle with jagged lines branching out like a web. I didn't recognize it, but something about it made me uneasy. The latch on the box was intricate, like something you'd find on an antique chest. It was stiff, like it hadn't been opened in years, but after a little effort, it clicked open. Inside were two things, a small black USB drive and an old, worn notebook. The notebook looked ancient, its leather cover cracked and faded. When I opened it, the pages were yellowed and fragile, filled with strange handwriting. The words weren't in English or any language I recognized. There were also symbols and diagrams, all of it cramped together like someone had been writing in a hurry. It didn't make any sense. The USB drive, on the other hand, was sleek and modern. It had no markings, no logo, except for a tiny sticker on one side that read, "Start here." I picked it up and turned it over in my hand, debating what to do. The rational part of me wanted to stop. I mean, whatever this was, it couldn't lead anywhere good. But then there was that other part. The part that had made me click buy in the first place. The part that needed to know. I plugged the USB into my laptop. At first, nothing happened. Then a single folder popped up on my screen. It was labeled, "Start here." I clicked it. Inside the folder was a single text file. When I opened it, there was a message. "Congratulations. You are now the keeper of the box of clarity. Follow the instructions carefully to unlock its secrets." Below that, there was a list of steps. The first step wasn't too complicated. At 3 a.m. tonight, light a candle and read the following passage aloud. The file included what looked like random letters and symbols. It wasn't any kind of language I knew. It almost looked like code or maybe gibberish. The second step was stranger. Once the ritual begins, the box must remain in your possession until the cycle is complete. Do not attempt to destroy or abandon it. And then there was the final line, written in bold. "Failure to comply will result in severe consequences." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My hands were sweaty and my chest felt tight. What the hell was this? A joke? Some kind of messed up prank? I glanced over at the wooden box, still sitting on my kitchen table. The symbol on the lid seemed to shimmer faintly in the light of my laptop screen. For a second, I thought about shoving everything back into the box and throwing it away, pretending it never happened. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was too far in now. As the clock crept closer to 3 a.m., I sat there in the dim glow of my laptop, trying to decide if I had the guts to follow the first instruction, After I sent that email from the USB, things started getting weird. It wasn't immediate. At first, everything seemed normal. I even felt a little stupid for being so nervous about it. But then, that night, the lights in my apartment started flickering. I tried to ignore it. Wiring issues, maybe. But my phone started acting up too. The screen glitched, froze, and then turned itself off. When I turned it back on, everything seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next morning, I checked the USB again. A new text file had appeared, labeled Task 2. The second task was even stranger. At 3 a.m., light a candle and read the following passage aloud while sitting in front of the box. It included a string of symbols and letters that didn't look like any language I'd ever seen. I stared at it for what felt like forever, trying to decide if I was really going to do this. By 3 a.m., I was sitting in my living room, the box on the coffee table in front of me, and a single candle burning beside it. I felt ridiculous and terrified. But I did it. I read the passage out loud, each word feeling heavier and more wrong in my mouth. As I finished the last word, the candle flickered violently and then went out. The darkness that followed wasn't normal. It felt alive, like it had weight, pressing in on me from all sides. And in that darkness, I swear I felt something move. I didn't sleep that night. The tasks kept coming. Another file appeared on the USB the next day. This time, the instructions told me to leave the box outside my front door overnight and bring it back inside at sunrise. The next task involved burning a piece of paper from the notebook and scattering the ashes around my apartment. Every time I completed a task, the strange occurrences got worse. At first, it was small things, objects not being where I left them, the occasional whisper when the room was quiet. But soon, I couldn't ignore it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to hear scratching inside the walls. Shadows moved across the room, even when there was nothing to cast them. My laptop started flashing cryptic messages like "chosen" and "complete the cycle." The worst was the phone calls. They always came late at night from a blocked number. At first I ignored them, but they kept coming. When I finally answered, all I heard was static, and then faint, distorted whispers. Sometimes I swear I heard laughter. I wanted to stop, wanted to throw the box and the USB in the trash and pretend none of this ever happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't follow the instructions, something worse would happen. One night, desperate for answers, I turned to the notebook. Most of it was still incomprehensible. Symbols, diagrams, and handwriting in a language I couldn't read. But after hours of studying it, I realized something. The diagrams weren't random. They were maps. They showed hallways, rooms, and doors, all of them leading to something. What exactly, I couldn't tell. But hidden between the maps were pieces of writing, fragments of what looked like diary entries. At first, I didn't understand what they were. The entries were short, written by different people, and each one described the same kind of experiences I'd been having, hearing voices, seeing shadows, objects moving on their own. And then I saw the phrase that tied them all together: "The only escape is to pass it on." The final entry hit me like a punch to the gut. It was longer than the others, written in shaky, frantic handwriting. The person described how their life had spiraled out of control after receiving the box. They talked about the same tasks, the same strange phenomena, and the same growing sense of being watched. But it was the last lines that stuck with me. "If you have the box, it's too late for you. There is no way out. The only escape is to give it to someone else, but even then, the cycle never ends." I shut the notebook and shoved it away, my hands shaking. I finally understood what I'd gotten myself into. This wasn't just some cursed object, it was a trap, a game. And now, I was the newest player. By this point, I was losing it. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think straight. Every shadow felt alive. Every noise made me jump. I kept my curtains shut tight, but it didn't help. The feeling of being watched never went away. At night, I'd hear footsteps outside my apartment, slow, deliberate. One night, I finally worked up the courage to peek out the window. That's when I saw him. There, just outside the glow of the street lamp, was a figure. He was tall, wearing a hood that hid his face, standing completely still. He wasn't moving, wasn't even trying to hide. He was just watching. I backed away from the window, heart racing. When I dared to look again, he was gone. The next morning, my computer turned itself on, and a message appeared on the screen. "You've been chosen. Complete the cycle." I tried everything to get rid of it, restarting, unplugging, even wiping the hard drive. Nothing worked. The message was always there, taunting me. I snapped. I grabbed the box and tried to destroy it. I smashed it against the floor. I hit it with a hammer. I even tried burning it. But no matter what I did, the box remained untouched. Not a scratch, not a dent. Frustrated and scared, I threw it in the trash and took the bag out to the dumpster, hoping that would be the end of it. The next morning, I woke up to find the box sitting on my kitchen table. That's when the final file appeared on the USB. It was labeled "Final Task." The message was short but clear. "Deliver the box to the following address by midnight tomorrow. If you refuse, you will suffer the consequences." Underneath was a name and an address. I didn't recognize either, but it was close. A small house in the next neighborhood over. I stared at the screen, shaking. Was this how it worked? Was the only way out to pass the curse on to someone else? I felt sick. The idea of handing this nightmare off to another person. It wasn't right, but I couldn't ignore the warning. I didn't want to find out what the consequences were. I drove to the address that night. The box sat in the passenger seat, as heavy as the guilt weighing on my chest. When I pulled up, I saw a small house with all the lights off. The windows were covered with thick curtains and the place looked quiet. Too quiet. For a long time, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel. Every part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but I couldn't. I knew I had no choice. Finally, I grabbed the box and walked up to the front door. When I rang the doorbell, the sound echoed inside the house, sharp and jarring. After what felt like forever, the door opened. A man stood there. He looked older, tired, like someone who had seen too much. He glanced at the box in my hands, then back at me. His eyes said everything. He knew. I handed him the box without a word. He nodded, took it, and shut the door. Driving home, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. It was over. I was free. But as the adrenaline faded, the guilt grew stronger. What had I just done? What would happen to him? When I got back to my apartment, I locked every door and window and collapsed into bed, too exhausted to think. But that night, I heard the whispers again. The next morning, I woke up to find the box sitting on my kitchen table. My blood ran cold. I stared at it, not daring to touch it. Somehow, it had come back. I finally understood the truth. There is no escape. The cycle never ends. And now, it's my turn to wait, to watch as someone else falls into the trap. Because no matter what I do, the box will always find its way back. I thought passing the box on would set me free. I thought I could finally breathe again, that I could escape the nightmare and get my life back. After leaving the box at the stranger's door, I drove home in silence. A small part of me felt relief, like I had beaten the game by following the instructions. But that feeling didn't last long. The guilt hit me like a freight train. I couldn't stop thinking about the man who opened the door, about how his tired eyes seemed to recognize what I was handing him. What would happen to him now? Would he go through the same hell I had? Back at home, I grabbed the notebook and the USB. I didn't need them anymore, and I didn't want them around to remind me. The notebook went first. I poured lighter fluid over it, carried it to the sink, and struck a match. As the flames consumed the leather cover and fragile pages, it felt like the words were fighting back. The symbols seemed to writhe and twist in the fire, refusing to burn. Next was the USB. I plugged it into my laptop one last time, deleted every file, and then smashed it to pieces with a hammer until it was nothing but shards of plastic and metal. Finally, I thought, it was over. A week passed. At first, everything seemed normal. The shadows were gone, the whispers stopped, and my apartment felt like it was mine again. I started to believe I'd done the right thing. Then I found the note. It was slipped under my door while I was asleep. Just a plain piece of paper with 3 words. "Welcome to the network." My stomach dropped. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in as I realized the truth. I hadn't escaped. The box was gone, but I was still part of whatever nightmare it was connected to. I had completed the cycle, but I was still in it. The night I decided to keep the box, I knew I was signing my own death sentence. I couldn't pass this curse on to someone else. It didn't feel right. But I also knew what that meant. There was no way out for me. I barricaded myself in my apartment, piling furniture against the doors and windows. I taped up the cracks and turned off every light. The box sat in the middle of the room, daring me to open it again, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Then the whispers started. They were louder than ever, rising and falling like a terrible chant. Shadows danced on the walls, stretching and bending in impossible ways. My phone rang over and over, but when I answered, all I heard was static and that awful, distorted laughter. Then came the footsteps. They weren't outside anymore. They were inside the apartment, slow, deliberate, getting closer. I turned toward the corner of the room, and that's when I saw him. The hooded figure stood there, motionless, his face hidden in the shadows. He didn't move or speak, but his presence filled the entire room like a weight pressing down on my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The last thing I heard before everything went silent was the whispers, overlapping into a distorted, inhuman scream. Whether you believe this story or not, let me give you one piece of advice. Stay away from the dark web. I thought I could handle it. I thought the horror stories were just exaggerations, urban legends meant to scare people off. But I was wrong. Once you open the wrong door, there's no going back. If you're smart, you'll never let your curiosity take you where mine did, because if you do, you might not get the chance to regret it.